Hello and welcome to the interview of France 24. Our guest today is one of the most powerful women in the world of global football. After having held senior positions for more than 20 years in the UN, she is now the world's first female Secretary General of FIFA. Hello, Fatma Samoura, and thank you for having us here at the Zurich headquarters of FIFA for today's interview.
Hello, Zina.
What does it mean for you today to be the first female non-European and Muslim woman to hold this post?
It's true that my nomination in May 2016 was a very exciting moment in the world of football. And as you said, it's the first time in the history of FIFA that a non-European, a woman, an African woman, was appointed to this post. But this should be an isolated example because since I have been in this position, we've seen that the world of football, which previously was quite macho, has now become more diverse and inclusive, and that shows that football is a changing world. Today, we have more than 6 women working in the administration, and the most important thing is we have a woman who's directing the Members Association, which is, of course, the leading program that controls all the football development. This is the first time in the history of FIFA that we have also worked on the development of women's football under the leadership of a woman. We have begun to realize that it is absolutely necessary that we have women working in the administration of the FIFA. We have 16 general secretaries among the 211 who are women, and among the FIFA committees. Before the new leadership, we had committees that had no women members at all, and now 16% of the committee's membership is female. And each confederation now must nominate at least one woman as a member to sit at the FIFA Directors Board.
Prior to your appointment in 2016, did you have a lot to do with football?
Well, yes, because I'm married to a former football player. I've been married to him for 30 years. And also in my family, my maternal uncles and my brothers always played football. And I like to kick a ball around, too, when I have the time. And it's something that I've always been very interested in. But I think that there's also the question of the power of football played in countries at war. And this is something that led me to believe that football is something that can really bring countries together. I worked in Liberia in the crisis between 1996 and 2000, and I could see that the warlords or the fighters accepted to stop fighting when it was raining and when they were playing football. This is an example that shows that football can be an instrument for bringing people together. Think about the Rwanda crisis. The one and only time when young people from both communities who were at a war that led to thousands and thousands of dead, the only time these two communities came together was when they were building a football stadium. And I think that football transcends not only religious barriers, but also social barriers and linguistic barriers. It is an international language. And it's not that different from what I was doing at the UN. Today, the FIFA's priority is to use football as an instrument of socialization to enable young girls, young men as well, to pursue a career in football.
Since your appointment, you said several times that women's football is a priority, and you helped create a special committee in FIFA for the development of women's football. How do you explain the gap that exists currently still between women's football and men's football, not only in the press, but also in terms of salaries?
Well, we could say that the most striking example would be to say that the Women's World Cup began in 1991. That's about 60 years after the Men's World Cup. Another thing that we could say is that in many countries where there are high-level men's football teams, we can see that there are social barriers that mean that women haven't had the same opportunities to have a career in football. An important effort should be made not only by the sports authorities, but also by the leagues as well. And I think that in France, we do have the example of the team from Lyon, where the men's team supported the creation of a powerful women's team. And other teams need to follow this example to ensure that women's football is a priority for social development and also to allow young women to really achieve self-realization. There is a problem of means, of course. And it's true that in the past, women football players have very short careers. So what we need to do is start developing girls' football leagues so that girls between age 6 and 10 can start playing football and think about it not just as a fun game or something as part of their education, but something that might actually change their lives. And I think the fact that we have set up quotas within the forward program that we have within the Federation means that there is an obligation to invest in women's football in order to have access to the program funds. This is something I think that will really support the development of women's football. And finally, with regard to administration, for the past 3 years, we have been trying to train women for leadership roles. Through the 3 conferences that we have organized, 65 women have been able to participate, and today 36% of these women have either been promoted or will soon be promoted to positions in the sport. What we can hope is with this training, we will have women who are not only professionals in the field, but also in football administration.
You mentioned the team from Lyon, and France will be hosting in 2019 the Women's Cup. How do you see women's football in France today?
For me, it's an opportunity to look at France from a different angle. You know, I studied in Lyon, Strasbourg, and Grenoble, but I think the fact that we will have the Women's Football Cup in France is a fabulous opportunity, and whenever the French Football Federation asks for my expertise or my experience or any help from the FIFA, I'm quite happy to make that available to the French Federation. The Women's World Cup in France will be grandiose. I have no doubts about that. France is used to organizing big sporting events. The 216 Euro Cup was a great event. And of course, France is getting ready for the Olympic Games in 2024. And I know that in France there has been a significant effort because in the past 3 or 4 years they've multiplied by 4 the number of women players who are enrolled in teams. And, you know, football is really a family matter, isn't it? So we want to encourage that family aspect. And the Women's Cup is an opportunity to underline that. We need to give the means to families, and we need to adjust our marketing methods to encourage families and women to play.
The World Cup in Russia is just around the corner. What perspectives are there for the 5 African teams playing, including Senegal, who'll be there in Russia?
Well, you know, African players are much appreciated around the world. There are some very talented football players in Africa. And among the 5 teams, maybe we'll have some happy surprises. My hope, of course, is that the best team wins, that all the players can really give their best. And that's what Senegal did in 2002 during the World Cup in Japan and Korea.
A moment ago, you talked about the talent of African footballers, and we see today, according to a study by the International Centre for Sports Studies, these young Africans represent 23% of First Division professional players in Europe, 27% in Asia, and we see this European dream dangled before these young players. There are minors who leave en masse their home countries in Africa to head towards Europe. President Ahmed of the CAF at a press conference in Accra recently said that they should stay in Africa. How do you explain the situation?
Well, we can develop football, professional football, in different ways in the African countries. First of all, the teams have to have means, and the Forward program is a very good example of that. But perhaps that is not quite enough. We need also to have assistance from authorities. We have to develop infrastructures in Africa. And when we're talking about the governance of football, well, there can't be interference. It has to be governance and not interference. I think in Africa, we have to develop football at the base. And the best way to do that is to have partnerships with the ministries of sport and education in the different countries. And also, we have to recognize the talents in African countries. We have to recognize these people before they leave. We have to improve training academies. We have to develop centers of excellence. We have to work on finding them sponsors. And this would be a way to avoid these dream merchants coming and whisking them away to other countries.
As you know, for the 2026 World Cup, Morocco is one of the candidate host countries, and if it wins that bid, it'll only be the second African nation to ever host and organize the event. What can Africa do to do better?
Well, you know, Africa already welcomed the World Cup in 2010 in South Africa. And I think it was a very successful World Cup. Morocco is a candidate, but as a General Secretary of the FIFA, I must remain neutral. What I hope is that through the new procedures that we have set up for greater transparency, greater democracy, and greater inclusiveness, all of these scandals of the past regarding attribution of the World Cup will really be in the past, that we have turned the page on those questions. And what we hope now is that the best country will win.
Thank you, Madam Secretary General Fatma Samoura, for joining us here at the FIFA headquarters. That brings this interview to a close. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for more news on France 24.